Welcome to Epoch Report, where we look past the headlines at the structures underneath. Today, the Strait of Hormuz and what a U.S. president's territorial claim really signals. We examine why this declaration matters now, as Gulf producers hedge and Iran positions itself. The dialogue unfolds around a central tension. Is this bluster or a retreat wearing a threat's clothing? Trump's threat to declare Hormuz U.S. territory is not about legal legitimacy. It's a pretext that arms Iran with counterclaims and tells allies the U.S. needs a shortcut. Gulf states are reducing dependence on U.S. security, while Iran links shipping to sanctions relief. The outcome? The strait is more contested than a month ago, and contested is not what dominance looks like. The question is whether Washington reads the same map. Now, let us get into it. A U.S. president declaring a vital strait U.S. territory while Gulf producers quietly court Tehran's rivals? That's not bluster. That's a retreat wearing a threat's clothing.
A threat is a threat. You're reading strategy into what is obvious bellicosity from a president who loves dramatic language. But look at the signal. Trump threatened Hormuz territory status to force Iran to talks. Reuters, August 20. That's not escalation for its own sake. It's a legal cover for a blockade. Legal cover? International law forbids unilateral territorial claims. This has no UN backing. It's theater, pure and simple. Theater can still be strategic. The point isn't legitimacy. It's creating a pretext. If he declares it territory, then any Iranian naval move becomes an act of aggression. And if Iran calls that bluff, which they will, you have a blockade without legal standing, and the Fifth Fleet is still sitting there. The U.S. hasn't retreated. The Fifth Fleet is there, but the question is what it's there for. The Gulf producers are hedging. They flipped their script, reducing dependence on U.S. security. CNN Business. That's the retreat signal.
Hedging is not abandonment. They're diversifying because China buys their oil. That's economics, not a read on U.S. intent. Economics is security when it comes to energy, and Iran is already linking Hormuz shipping to sanctions relief. They're positioning to weaponize the strait precisely because they sense U.S. leverage fading.
Iran always links shipping to sanctions. That's their standard playbook. You're building a full theory on a Reddit post and routine posturing.
Fair, the Reddit post isn't evidence. But the pattern is, Trump declares territory, Iran demands relief, Gulf states hedge. 3 moves pointing the same direction.
Or Trump declares territory because he wants to look tough, Iran reacts because that's what Iran does, and Gulf states hedge because they always hedge. You need causation, not correlation.
The causation is overstretch. A superpower doesn't claim a strait as territory unless it can't control it another way. That's the tell. Or a superpower does it because it can. The U.S. has the strongest navy in the region. No one is challenging that dominance. No one is challenging it openly. But the challenge is in the hedging. When your allies make contingency plans with your adversaries, you've lost something that ships can't replace.
So, the strongest case for your retreat theory is that Gulf states are doing what they've always done, balancing. That's a weak foundation for predicting a blockade or war.
Then what explains the declaration? If it's just bluster, why pick Hormuz specifically? The one place where a misstep means global oil prices spike.
Because it's the most dramatic thing he could say. Trump picks the most alarming option because it gets the most attention. Weak analysis treats that as policy.
I'll concede the legal basis is shaky. It's not a real claim. But the rhetoric itself is a signal of diminished options. You don't posture this hard when you're winning.
You posture this hard when you're negotiating. It's a starting bid. He does this with tariffs, with NATO, with everyone. The difference is the stakes here are higher, and your reading inflates the risk.
The stakes are higher precisely because he's using territorial language. That can't be walked back easily. If Iran tests it, he has to respond or lose face.
That's the strongest argument you've made. You might cause a war by accident, not design. But that's not retreat. That's recklessness.
Retreat and recklessness can be the same thing. When you're overstretched, you lash out at the least resistance. And Iran knows it. That's why they're making counterclaims.
Counterclaims? Iran has always claimed the strait is theirs. You're crediting them with a strategy that's just their permanent position. Their permanent position just got more credible because the U.S. effectively legitimized the idea that straits are claimable territory. By trying to own it, Trump opened the door for Iran to own it too. That's the most interesting thing you've said. The unintended consequence is real, but it's a consequence of bluster, not a sign of strategic retreat. Intent matters less than outcome. The outcome is that U.S. claims weaken upon contact, Gulf states watch, and China fills the vacuum. Whether he meant to retreat is irrelevant. China isn't filling any vacuum. They're buying oil, not providing security. The U.S. is still the only guarantor in the region. That's the reality. For now. But the guarantee is only as strong as the perception that it will be used. This declaration made that perception murkier, not stronger. I don't deny the perception shifted, but calling it retreat ignores the Fifth Fleet, the continued exercises, the actual military presence. Those are facts. The military presence is real, but presence isn't posture. The posturing changed from quiet deterrence to loud assertion. That's what overstretch sounds like. If I grant you overstretch, what's the alternative? You think the U.S. should just leave? That's its own risk.
I think the choice is already being made. The hedging is the allies' vote, and their votes matter more than any presidential statement.
Then we're at an impasse. You see retreat in the hedging. I see adaptation. But neither of us can predict what Iran does next. And that's the real unknown.
That's where we land. The declaration may be theater, but it's theater that arms Iran with legal counterclaims and tells allies the U.S. needs a shortcut. Conventional reading misses that.
And the contrarian reading risks overstating weakness the U.S. hasn't shown. Either way, the strait is more contested than it was a month ago. That's measurable.
Contested is the word, and contested is not what dominance looks like. The question is whether anyone in Washington is reading the same map. Finally, on the contested strait, the dialogue concluded that the declaration, though legally shaky, has real consequences. It legitimizes the idea that straits are claimable, giving Iran cover for its own claims, and it signals to allies that the U.S. may be overstretched. Whether bluster or strategy, the perception shifted, and that perception is what matters. That is all for this episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it worth your time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Leave a comment below with where you think this goes. See you next time.